If you've played Sonic Heroes, you're probably no stranger to the ever-present jank this game has on offer, with mechanics that work as intended 90% of 50% of the time. The goal of this video is not to criticize the spaghetti code of Sonic Heroes, but rather embrace and abuse it to gain every possible advantage, as we're going to try and beat the game without jumping or flying a single time. Before we start the run, let's argue semantics. We need to establish some ground rules so we're all on the same page here. So, what is a jump? That sounds like a simple question. A jump is that thing you do when you press the A button to leap off the ground. And that would be the whole answer if I were a coward. There's a lot more to it than that, and after much deliberation, what I defined as a jump was... Okay, what the hell? I'm not reading all that. Instead, since I don't want to stymie the pacing of this video with a bunch of nerd shit technical jargon, a list of banned actions as well as the reason for banning them will be included in the description for anyone interested. Or just pause and read them on screen now. For those who don't want to waste their time reading it, don't worry, I wouldn't either. We'll address any edge cases as they become relevant, but for now let's get started and taint some precious childhood memories. We'll be playing as Team Sonic. This won't be a 100% completion run, so the challenge ends once every story mission has been completed as a single team. For the record, this was attempted with every team in the game. Here's a quick summary of the results. Team Dark gets stuck on Seaside Hill, Team Rose loses in the unskippable tutorial level, and Team Chaotix, well, they actually made it pretty far thanks to Vector, and there were some cool strats used to navigate seemingly impossible levels, but ultimately they got trapped in purgatory early into Rail Canyon. A damn shame too, since Vector's been my role model ever since I was a kid.
What do you think you're doing here?
Who's this fraud?
With all that, it's time for Team Sonic to shine. The early bits of Seaside Hill are nothing too out of the ordinary, and there's plenty of alternate paths where jumping is strictly voluntary. It isn't until after this checkpoint that we approach the bane of every neurotic challenge runner: a slightly elevated platform. Without jumping, our moveset is very limited, so even the tiniest obstacles are a Herculean task to overcome. Luckily, that isn't the case for tiny ledges like this. With the flight formation, we're able to use the action button to thundershoot, granting us a tiny boost off the ground. For some reason, the first time Sonic is launched with thundershoot, we don't gain much height, but the second time we gain a significantly larger boost. The next hurdle of Seaside Hill are these ruins that emerge from the water. Tails can thundershoot to scale up until the last part demands just a little too much height, which means we're gonna have to get creative. I theorized that using Sonic's blue tornado to snap onto the enemy would get us just barely over the top. The problem is that normally using the tornado requires the player to jump, then input the action button mid-air. We can get around this by rolling off the ledge and pressing the B button immediately once airborne. Once activated, we rely on the tornado's grossly overtuned magnetism to snap onto the flying enemy, homing attack off it, and land safely on top of the ruins. After that, there isn't much in terms of complications until after this checkpoint where we are launched into a boxed off area with 3 flying enemies, and that's it, the run is dead. I tried a few things, but without any slopes to gain momentum or drops to activate Tornado, our options are severely limited. I ended up skipping this part and continuing on, making this the first mandatory jump of the run. Is what I planned to say, but something pulled me back, a feeling in my gut that wouldn't let me move on from this roadblock. I shouldn't have looked behind me, but I did. I peered into the arcane and gained forbidden knowledge beyond mortal comprehension. So what exactly did I learn staring into that eldritch abyss? Well, it's a made-up technique I call the lightspeed attack cancel chain. Let's break down the first part, the lightspeed attack. To initiate this, the player must first fire off a Team Blast, which can be done once this gauge in the top right fills up. After use, the Team Blast gauge will slowly deplete. While it depletes, if Sonic is airborne near an enemy, the action prompt will appear in the top right, letting us press the B button to activate a lightspeed attack. During this animation, Sonic zips around and kills all nearby enemies. Now for the second part. We can cancel this animation by pressing B again. This will launch Sonic back towards where he initiated the attack. Notice I said towards because if there are any walls or platforms in the way, they'll block his path, causing a displacement. Now for the last part, you can chain 2 of these together by inputting B again within a tiny window after the game is done sending Sonic back to his origin point. This window can be between a few frames and a whole second depending on factors like how far Sonic is from the nearest enemy or how close he was to the ground. Chaining the attack displaces Sonic a little bit more each time. Hopefully all of that makes sense because it'll be very important for this part and many other segments of this run. The only time Sonic can initiate the attack is when he's airborne, and the only way to be airborne and close enough to the enemies to use it is by launching off this ramp. This doesn't do anything for us as canceling the attack just pushes us the wrong way. It all felt overwhelmingly hopeless, but then Tails swooped in to save the day. As it turns out, using Thundershoot with Team Blast active also sends Sonic into his lightspeed attack, and when swapping to Sonic during this, the camera snaps to him as opposed to teleporting the character like it normally would. That said, this trick is complete nonsense and it's a total crapshoot whether it works or not. My patented strategy was to thundershoot near this wall, switch to Sonic, mash B, and oh, would you look at that, it just kinda worked. The rest of Seaside Hill was a breeze, and just like that, we have beaten the first level out of 14. My god, this might have been a mistake. Luckily, Ocean Gate gives us some breathing room. There's a couple ledges here that showcase the upper limit of what Tails' Thundershoot boosts are capable of, and also we make sure not to take this dead-end flying path on these turtles, but other than that, the level is basically free. Next up, we fight Eggman and his Eggcock. His Egg Hawk. And I feel like there's nothing to talk about here. Same with all the other bosses and team fights in this game. There's practically no unique challenge present, and while I did complete them all to be sure, I won't be talking about them in this video. Grand Metropolis is next, and this is another freebie. It serves as an introduction to these poles. Normally we're supposed to use a tornado to swing off them, but we can achieve the same effect by using Rocket Excel. Or if Sonic is level 3, Homing Attack also works. All of these have the same wind properties as Tornado. Anyways, that's the entire level. Power Plant is where dreams go to die. There are several sections where the game expects you to clear out all the Eggman's robots
Look at all those Eggman robots.
to unlock a path forward, and at first it didn't seem like an issue. One thing of note here is we have to stand on this platform as the last enemy dies, or else we'd be locked out of progressing. So far so good, but then the game throws this monstrosity at us. We're expected to reach the overhead gravity lift, and we're able to get so close, but as much as I hate to say it, there isn't anything clever we can do this time to get out of this predicament. Believe me, I tried for hours and went back to this stage multiple times. Since we're forced to use a flight here, this run officially goes from jumpless to minimum jumps. At least that's what I thought as I was writing this paragraph, but then the brainworms took control again, forcing me to launch the game and do it goddamn right. So here's how I got past it. We charge up a Team Blast and wait for the flying robot to be as far away as possible. Let Team Blast rip and immediately run to the rising platform under the gravity lift. Since we were far enough away, the Team Blast didn't kill the robot, which is exactly what we were hoping for. At the rising platform, we have to swap to Tails in a very specific way. Because using Thundershoot would eliminate the robot, we have to rely on a tiny little bump we sometimes get while swapping to flight formation. This bump usually seems to occur while swapping while Knuckles is airborne, but it's still fairly inconsistent. Next, we switch to Sonic, roll off the platform, and tornado an inch above the ground. Reminder that all this has to be completed before the Team Blast gauge runs out. Thanks to Tornado, we get some height and initiate a lightspeed attack cancel on the off-screen robot. Then after doing all that, we have to hope and pray that the game is feeling generous, because if not, then all that was for nothing and we have to do it again. And I did do it again. And again. And again. I practiced this trick alone for about 45 minutes until something magical happened. And that wasn't even close to the hardest trick in the run. Speaking of tricks, here's another one later in Power Plant that might be a contender for top 5 in terms of difficulty. I also initially ruled this part as impossible, but I came back here later screwing around and mashing buttons when suddenly this happened. And I knew at that moment that it was possible. So we keep trying. Over and over again. Sometimes we get launched straight up, other times we get no height at all. I notice a couple patterns through all this. One is that before hitting the apex of the slope, we want to steer hard into the wall. This is what launches us off the ground. The next is that just a regular Rocket Excel doesn't give enough speed. We need to run down the ramp around the boosters, Rocket Excel, and then slide kick. Given enough attempts, we'll hopefully get launched at the perfect velocity. It looks a little something like this. Yo! With all that out of the way, we can use tornadoes and homing attacks to get up top here, letting us ride a rail and skip that whole mess down below. Lastly, there's this segment which feels like it might as well have been the midterm exam of the run. We have to put all the little exploits we've been using to the test, like Thundershoot boosting and dropping off ledge to use Tornado, all while being chased by rising lava. There's one part close to the top where we can't afford to make even a single error, lest we get caught by the rising pool of orange juice. And to cap it all off, at the very end of the gauntlet is what I like to call a skill check. We can't reach the spring up here on our own, meaning we need to get boosted into it by the lava. To do this without dying, we need some spare rings in our pocket, meaning we can't have taken any damage from lava in the previous section. It's the ultimate race against time and janky video game mechanics, but after several attempts, we make it through and breathe a sigh of relief. That's Power Plant complete. Casino Park starts with the most thematically fitting roadblock imaginable. In order to progress, we need to break the glass here, which you'd normally do by jumping as Knuckles and dunking the glass with Sonic or Tails. This is kinda awkward as we're sorta doing that whole no jump thing, which means we'll have to find an alternative. Fortunately, such an alternative does exist. When Knuckles is level 1 or higher, he unlocks a third hit in his combo where he jumps a tiny bit and slams down, which can break the glass. The unfortunate part of this is that in order to level up our little echidna, an enemy needs to drop a red orb. The red orbs drop randomly from enemies defeated by Sonic or Tails, meaning Casino Zone locks us out with an RNG check. If none of the enemies before the glass drop the power-up we need, we have to restart and try again. It's a bit of a pain in the ass, but eventually we get it, break the glass, and carry on. At this part, we strategically break glass without falling down, and do a very satisfying slide kick to get over this group of enemies and land on a checkpoint. We take a detour to the highest floor of this building, and from here we do a rocket excel into a slide kick, letting us boost over top of a wall that would normally require us to fly and grab 2 switches. One final pinball table and Casino Park is complete. Bingo Highway is like Casino Park's more murdery older brother. Early on, we have some slightly tricky platforming to do on top of these moving dice. Failure to schmoove might as well be the death sentence, as we would land on the table below, eventually being sent into a dead end. Later on, we need to bounce on a floating die and tornado the enemy above to gain height. But we can't do that as we've already used our tornado earlier. Wait, what? Now you, the viewer, are probably baffled and have no idea what I mean by this, and that's because somehow I've managed to get this far into the video without even mentioning a problematic quirk in the game's code that overhauls how we need to approach routing every single area. To put it as simply as possible, it seems the tornado is only programmed to refresh on jump or when bouncing off an enemy with homing attack, meaning we have to do one of those 2 actions or die if we want to use tornado twice in a level. I suspect that the developers never considered that some whack job would try to use Tornado twice in a row without jumping first. Sega, please consider hiring me as a QA tester for Sonic Heroes 2. Back to the level, we abuse light speed attack in lieu of a tornado, then there's only one more obstacle that looks fairly intimidating. This vertical ascent up a bunch of dice. Good thing there's a hidden spring here that gets us most of the way up, and a tornado does the rest. For the remainder of this run, I made it a habit to homing attack an enemy after every tornado wherever possible to get the reset. All in all, Bingo Highway wasn't actually hard for any reason related to this challenge. These pinball tables can go suck my ass though. You're fucking kidding me. We're now almost halfway through the game, and things are looking pretty optimistic, but don't get too excited, boys. Those were the easy ones. For Rail Canyon, I did something a little bit odd. I was still in the process of deciding whether rail switching should be allowed or not, and decided that for now I'd try to beat the level without it. We were able to get surprisingly far, even clearing the part where the game flat out tells us to switch rails before ramming a train into us. All we had to do was lean left in flight formation, and there was a good chance we'd be knocked onto the other railing after taking damage. At this giant fan, we're able to glide just barely far enough with Knuckles to land in between these rails, then thundershoot up with Tails. And that's about it. As long as we pick the correct rail, we can beat the entire level without jumping or rail switching. Bullet Station is where I suspect things may get a bit controversial, and I plan to relish in the backlash. Early on, we encounter a familiar pain in the ass. We're able to catch a ride up, bait these armored trains towards us, freeze one with Thundershoot, then roll off the ledge, Tornado, homing attack, Tornado again, and land on this thin wall. From here we can Thundershoot up and lay gaze upon another RNG lock. Are you shitting me? We've been over this already. After a bit of farming and resetting, we managed to get Knuckles to level 1 and smash through the floor. As a side note, I also played this level with the no rail switching clause, and early we crash into what looks to be a run ender. However, we get around this by going as fast as possible, then swapping to Tails right as we collide with the spike ball while holding hard left on the control stick. Doing this, we can get a lucky bounce to the left-hand railing and proceed. Next, we need to activate 3 switches and open the door. Or so the game says, but really, doors are merely a suggestion. After getting launched out of a giant gun barrel, we're funneled into another train sequence. Here we have to lure this enemy as close to the ledge as possible, thundershoot it to drop its elevation, then tornado off the ledge here, and if done right, we'll barely be able to homing attack onto it, letting us get to the next train. And this is where things get tricky. Launching off the pole drops us directly before these parallel walls, where the game expects us to do a triangle jump. but since these are banned, we'll have to improvise as usual. Important side note, even if I had allowed triangle jumps, there's another programming quirk similar to the tornado which prevents Sonic from initiating a triangle jump unless the player has jumped as Sonic at least once at any point in the level. Don't ask me why this is the case, but it sure made the decision to ban triangle jumps a lot easier. At first I tried abusing the light speed attack, but we get hard counterplayed by the Sega devs who placed a death floor an inch below the train platform. For once, the broken move we'd been relying on the whole game wasn't going to solve all our problems. So instead, here's what we do. After landing, these two robots rush us down. One of them commits self-unbirth while the other just stands there completely catatonic, blissfully unaware that he's about to be used as setup fodder. We roll off the edge, then immediately homing attack towards him, resetting Tornado, which gives us enough distance to reset again off this robot and land on a suspiciously convenient stack of crates. Thanks to this, we're able to roll off and Tornado again. If done precisely in the right spot, we'll be able to animation cancel the Tornado, letting us land a homing attack on the robot just before it gets launched airborne, allowing for yet another Tornado, snapping us to the helpless chunk of metal and letting us land atop these walls. Now for what I suspect is going to be a disappointment to a lot of you. We made it so far without jumping, but now we're forced into an on-rails bobsled section where the game throws multiple damaging lasers at us and outright demands that we jump. Unlike the rest of the game, this sled can only take 3 hits before we lose a life, and there are no ways around this segment that don't involve jumping or flying. So now I have only 2 options ahead of me. I can either admit defeat and humbly acknowledge that I failed in my mission, or I can double down and act like a pedantic fuckstick. That said, is it truly worth making a complete ass of myself just because I'm too ashamed to admit defeat over an arbitrary self-imposed restriction in a scores-old children's game? I think the answer's obvious. It is with a heavy heart that I solemnly inform you that the bobsled jump does not count as a jump at all, and if you think it does, you are dead wrong. Let me break it down for you pea-brained addlepates. The upward lift being applied to this bobsled is not a push from the ground, but rather a lift from above. This is evidenced by the fact that the game explicitly states in a hint, if Tails falls off, the bobsled won't be able to jump. If anything, this is more like flying than jumping, which is also against the rules. Look, the bobsled ride is practically its own self-contained game mode, and no matter what you think, the video's gonna continue regardless, so... Immediately after, we're faced with a familiar 3-switch dilemma. Since we don't have Tornado anymore, there is no way we're getting that high up switch, so instead we just travel directly through the door again. After getting ejaculated from one more cannon, the level ends and we can all agree that bobsleds are not real, and you, the viewer, were having yet another psychotic episode. Next up in Frog Forest, we encounter a major roadblock early on. After the first checkpoint, there's a boost ring which is just barely too high to reach via Thundershoot or Tornado. However, there happens to be a single robot on a platform up ahead, meaning we may be able to launch far enough to abuse Lightspeed attack again. The issue is that, due to the phallic shape of the platform, Sonic gets wedged under the tip and locked into position. There doesn't appear to be anything around that can help, so it looks like we're gonna have to concede and use a jump here. Or I could lampshade what happened because I have genuinely no idea how or why the hell this worked. This attack is straight up plot armor, but like, now what? We're stranded here with a robot, no Tornado, and no way to cross the gap to the next mushroom. Well, as if by some divine gift of God, the edges of these cock platforms are sloped. This means we can kick off the rim and land on the schlong beside us, though we have to be careful not to trigger the frog here, otherwise a lily pad will grow above the robot, causing some problems later. Next, we precisely rocket excel back towards the previous platform. If done right, the incline should give us enough height to homing attack the robot, resetting Tornado. We rocket excel past the robot, off the ledge, input a Tornado as quick as possible, and just like that we have performed witchcraft and are able to completely scale this wall. The reason this was all necessary is because the weird lily pad platforms are an atrocity of game design. You can't rocket excel off them because they make your team spaz the fuck out, and even when the game doesn't randomly stagger our movement for no reason, a slide kick doesn't send us far enough. Luckily, we don't have to deal with them anymore in this level. Except that was a lie, here they are again. If this looks like it should be easy, then I failed to communicate just how much these lily pads suck fuck. That said, once we win the struggle for control of the character, we can slide kick here, Tornado here, and bounce here. Now we somehow have to make it up this ledge. I get the idea to use Lightspeed attack and try to find some geometry that would get us even a pixel off the ground, but what we got instead was incredibly extra. It appears we're screwed once again as we don't have Tornado, but we're bailed out by a secret mushroom that just bounces us straight up. The level ends shortly after and we move on to Lost Jungle. Right off the bat, we're able to roll off a ledge and tornado onto this bomber robot, letting us traverse the mushroom tops and grab a vine to proceed. A ledge before the first checkpoint ends up being too high, so we're gonna have to find some alternative methods. We homing attack this flying robot to refresh Tornado, and can you guess how we solve our elevation problem? I'll give you a hint. It rhymes with Schlight Speed Schlattack. The next major roadblock involves more of those godforsaken lily pads. The game asks the player to make about 5 jumps to get all the way up. We can get past the first couple jumps by baiting this abductor robot over, then using Tornado and homing attack for some height, but that barely gets us halfway there. To save another jump we can slide kick the wall, but unfortunately can't do it again with this side higher up. There's a flying robot here just begging to be taken advantage of, but without Tornado our options are limited. What I did next is probably the most disgusting case of beginner's luck I've had in this run. We thundershoot the robot to make it fall, switch back to Sonic, roll off the lily pad and homing attack it. Then we Tornado and homing attack off the side of this wall, getting the luckiest bounce I've ever seen. A bit higher up we use a fruit as a spring, giving us enough height to homing attack this bomber and Tornado up to the above platform. From here there's only some slightly tricky platforming until we end up having to climb a plant that sprouts out of the ground. Since Tails can't quite get high enough with Thundershoot, we'll need another way up. Doing some scouting, it turns out there's an enemy a bit higher up in the stage, and you know what that means. We backtrack a bit before firing off a team blast, then we bounce off a mushroom, ride the rail the wrong way, and what Knuckles says at this moment kind of sums it all up.
Let Sonic take care of this.
Finally, we complete a chase sequence that is responsible for more than a few childhood nightmares, and that's stage complete, meaning it's time for Hang Castle. Hang Castle wastes no time in showing us the first roadblock, but like many other roadblocks, a single plot armor attack gets the job done. At the first checkpoint, a door tries and fails to block our path. Instead of riding this rail down to the bottom, we walk off to skip a bunch of pointless platforming, then roll through yet another door, even though the switch was like 5 feet away this time. On the other side of that door was an open area with a ledge too tall to climb. Our only sliver of hope was an item cage that we could use to initiate a tornado and homing attack off the last remaining enemy. So we, did that. Next, we use a tornado to help climb a spiraling tower, pull a switch, and the rest is a breeze. Towards the end of the level, the game tries to peer pressure me into jumping.
Let's jump!
Jump now! Jump now!
It almost works, but Simon didn't say, motherfucker. Next level is Mystic Mansion, which single-handedly delayed this video by about 2 weeks. If nothing else, this challenge has made me realize that I have a problem when it comes to perfectionism. I debated not putting out this video at all just because I couldn't beat this one level. Our roadblock comes before the first checkpoint. Once we get to the top of these rising platforms, there's no way up without flying. The enemies in the subsequent room are too far to interact with, and the enemies in the previous room all have to be destroyed to open the door, with no way to respawn them. And before you say anything, no, the Champion's Covenant is not in this game. That said, a door is a door and we can just clip through, but then what? By default, all the robots wander around their spawn point with very little deviation. Their default location is too far away to be useful, and the only option is to bait them into attacking, stun them, then go through all the door clip shenanigans and do Team Blast before they start moving again. But even that's not enough, as the only way light speed attack cancel chains would accomplish anything is if we initiated it from higher up. This takes way too long, and in that time, the enemy outside has become Schrodinger's Eggman's robot, as we can no longer see it and therefore have no way to confirm whether or not it has moved out of range, which it almost definitely has. So no, I can't beat every level in Sonic Heroes Jumpless, and this would be the part where I finally formally take the L and carry on, but the story doesn't end here. When I was rewatching gameplay from Frog Forest, I saw something that was so insane that I don't know how I managed to forget it happened. You're probably asking the same question I did when I first watched this. What in the ever-loving shit was that? After some testing, I found out this was the result of a frame-perfect input. It's not even fair to call the Lightspeed attack plot armor because at this point it's more like a plot hole. It was almost certainly theoretically possible to skip the jump in Mystic Mansion with this technique. Keyword theoretically. There's still the issue of actually performing it all within the aforementioned time constraints. I'm not lying this time when I said I wasn't able to beat it, so instead I learned how to task just so I could show you all what it would look like if I were good at video games. First, we lure a robot to the end of the room and stun it in place with Thundershoot. Then we have about 5 seconds to beeline for the front door, Thundershoot boost up, and clip through. Next, we run to position and activate Team Blast. We then use our handy tool assist to turbo spam the B button and...
Blast away! Level up!
it's as easy as that. For the record, Mystic Mansion was the only time in this run Tool Assist was used. It'll be all me from here on. We have a break for a bit with some fun, simple platforming before... oh no, not the bobsled again. I was about to have an aneurysm, but thankfully these aren't bobsleds. They are trolleys. There are 2 vital distinctions here. Firstly, unlike bobsleds, trolleys are real. And second, we don't have to press the A button to clear any of these segments. Afterwards, we enter a room with 3 orbs that warp us into similar but different rooms. The one on the left brings us to the room that actually lets us progress. So we go there, light speed attack cancel up to the mage robot, tornado, homing attack, then tornado again up to a platform where we grab a lift ring to proceed. From here, it's smooth sailing until we end up at another triangle jump segment that is way harder than it looks. So here I was gonna break down the trick frame by frame, but I decided that the explanation was excruciatingly boring, so I'll just do you a favor and skip to the end. Something, velocity, vectors, walls, physics. Next, we're expected to fly up yet another lift, but they put an enemy at the top this time, so all it takes is a single plot hole boost to get up. To cap off Mystic Mansion, the game throws 3 consecutive platforming challenges at us, one designed for each of the 3 team formations. The speed room is easy, the power room is easy, but the flight room looks difficult. A platforming challenge designed around the ability to fly sounds like a nightmare. Ironically, there's no verticality required for any of it, and just to flex, I beat the whole thing without even using Tornado. And that is somehow the entirety of Mystic Mansion without a single jump. Egg feet. Fuck me. Egg Fleet starts off tame with some fun, simple platforming, but presents an immediate and drastic difficulty spike upon boarding the first battleship. We have to scale an entire vertical platforming section, and we're not using tasks for this level, so the frame-perfect plot hole jump is off the table. We forge a path up by chaining homing attacks and tornadoes off nearby enemies and launchers, but we get stuck about halfway up with no tornado. A quick scout reveals that there are enemies up here, but they are only triggered to spawn once you've reached the top. This would make plot armor attack shenanigans impossible. Just kidding, reality is scripted to always give me the win, much like how the robots are scripted to spawn if you cross this threshold. Nothing of note happens until we arrive at the second battleship, which is basically the same as the first, but just different enough to cause a headache. We tactically throw the team to their deaths to reset everyone's level, then begin our ascent. The cannons on the side don't give us quite enough height, but we can tornado up to a higher robot, homing attack an item, then homing attack the airborne robot again. The second difference is that no enemies spawn at the top here, and they removed the spring that was on the other ship. I discovered that there were more launchers up ahead though, and through some sort of genuine divine miracle, this happened. Oh my god, it worked! I can't believe it! This is a fucking miracle! Then it's just a straight walk to the end, and that's Egg Fleet complete. Which means we head to Final Fortress, the last stage in the entire game. At the start of the level, we can use this trail of rings to ride a rail and skip over a bunch of optional platforming. From here, we rocket excel and tornado from platform to platform until we approach a rail which drops us into a flight section. The initial plan was to try and use plot armor attack to scale our way up, but there's a much easier method. We just wait for the platform to fall and drop down below to where this launcher is. There's springs there that bring us all the way up. At the top, there's a wall of lasers that we're expected to fly over with no other way around. So we do the only reasonable thing and ram our head into it repeatedly until we are launched up for some reason I genuinely can't explain. After a brief rail segment, we reach another falling platform, but this time we're supposed to fly to grab the lift ring. We try to get there as fast as possible and Thundershoot boost up. This gets us so close, but ultimately is either impossible or so difficult it isn't worth it. So obviously the next step is to try the plot armor attack. The issue with this is that there's no enemy to lock onto. More specifically, there is one that spawns, but only after we cross the trigger to spawn it. Anyone else getting deja vu? We managed to trigger the spawn from below, netting us yet another pity win. Next, we need to trigger 3 switches to turn on a fan, but there's a minor complication. They are all on slightly elevated ground. We can trigger the first 2 easy, but Tails can't boost up to the last one alone. This is the one and only niche case where Knuckles saves us from having to jump. At level 1 or higher, we can use the third hit of his combo to get just high enough off the ground. We approach yet another disabled fan, and the only way to proceed is to fly up to a switch to enable it. Or Hear me out. Plot armor attack. We track onto the enemies above and carry on like normal. We are so close with only one obstacle remaining. For Final Fortress's grand finale, we have to survive a giant fucking laser being beamed directly into our skulls. The laser spans all 3 rails, so even rail switching provides no benefit. Additionally, it lingers long enough to hit us twice and stops all momentum. An outright death sentence. The solution to this problem, the final obstacle of the entire run, will be explained after a short commercial break. Okay, it really wasn't that hard. The answer was just do the same thing except faster. That's it. The last goal ring of the entire run. We topple the Egg Emperor, and just like that, we've officially cleared every level in the game without jumping or flying, and we all unanimously agree that bobsleds are propaganda incepted into your fragile mind by none other than Big Jump himself. Oh, and thanks for hitting that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.